my name is Sarah Spinuzzi. I am a staff attorney at Orange County Coastkeeper, and joined with me today is Colin Kelly. He's our senior staff attorney. Colin, you've been with Coastkeeper for 10 years?
I've been with Coastkeeper since 2007, and I've been the staff attorney since 2010.
Excellent. So today, given everything that's going on with the coronavirus pandemic and everybody being asked to stay at home, and in some cases ordered to stay at home, we wanted to find new ways to connect with our members and with our supporters, and hopefully to provide some educational and interesting content, just to let the community know that Orange County Coastkeeper is still working, and we are still doing everything we can to protect the coast from home. And so today, the topic is going to be coastal access and how we go about preserving coastal access, and in addition to that, both in ordinary times and currently with the pandemic going on, there's lots of people who are flocking to the beaches because everything else is closed. So we're going to talk about how an emergency declaration coincides with coastal access and kind of where we're at. So just a little bit of a disclaimer. We are not offering any legal advice to any specific person or situation. This is for educational purposes only, and we're not allowed to give any legal advice to viewers. So please just view this as educational. And as lawyers, we always have to give disclaimers. So like I said, just an overview of the topics that we plan on covering is first, California has a constitutional right to access the coast, the general terms of the Coastal Act, and in addition to that, how the Coastal Act and the emergency declaration with the pandemic are interacting and kind of what the consequences of that are. And then if we still have time, we can just briefly cover potential water quality issues during the COVID-19 outbreak if time allows. So first of all, there's been a lot of stuff in the news about the beachgoers in Miami, Florida, the spring breakers who are supposed to be staying off the beach. There's been a lot of videos going around about, you know, people, the governor ordering people to stay off of the beaches, but at the same time, lots of spring breakers want to access the coast and they don't really care or take this seriously. And so it's important to realize that the way that our coast has been developed over the past 50 or 60 years is a lot different from how the coast has been developed in other parts of the country. So in California, we have a constitutional right to access the beach. And then in order to protect that constitutional right, we passed in 1976 the California Coastal Act. And the California Coastal Act is a very robust piece of legislation that requires anybody who's seeking to develop anything within the coastal zone, which is about 2 miles inland, that they have to seek a coastal development permit, and that their development has to be consistent with providing maximum access to the public. This is different from places like Miami, a lot of beaches on the East Coast in New York, where they have very expensive beach parking lots. You're allowed to put up private hotels without any public access ways. And so the way that we have developed our coast is somewhat unique in comparison to some of the East Coast cities and some of the high-rise developments that are more frequently seen in Florida and other places throughout the world that you don't see so much of here in California. And so, Colin, do you want to talk about the Coastal Act and developments generally a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a coastal community a couple blocks up from the beach, and so getting access to the beach has been something I've known throughout my entire life and appreciated, and you really don't appreciate it until you leave parts of well, California mostly, and realized that a lot of communities do have high rises along the coast, and a lot of shade instead of sun when you're in the shadows of some of these high rises. It is a great benefit that we do have the ability to access the beach. I think the most important thing today is the fact that that access does remain. Californians are still allowed to go to the beach. There's been a real movement, consistent movement between different elected officials on the importance of being outside for emotional and security reasons, fresh air, getting a perspective on what's going on, and also to alleviate some stress. While there have been closures along the beaches of certain types of activities like and amenities like bathrooms and parking lots, discourage, and in fact, the community I'm from, I was raised in Manhattan Beach, they padlocked the pier. So those kind of activities ordinarily would require permits from the regulator, which in this instance is the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission's broad view has been that access to the coastal areas should be, fair and equitable and open. It's only in really rare instances that something like this is happening where there's restrictions without the need of a permit. Before we get into, I think, some of the constraints that are being allowed during this extraordinary time, I think it's important to go over some safety things as well. So some of the things just to remember before we get into the legal issues are, if you're sick, stay at home, please. And then, try to keep a 6-foot distance between you and other people. Avoid high risk or remote activities. So there might be an area that you really enjoy along the coast. Say San Clemente, there's some really nice bluffs. Say you wanted to walk along a trail along those bluffs or something, but you know that some of those might be not too secure. They might have an issue with sloughing. Maybe avoid that, because let's say that you go to that area, your friends or other people don't know you're there, and there is a slide. You might not have another person go into that area for a number of days. So that's something to avoid. Stay regional. That's something that I'm trying to keep in mind. So if you're not used to going from, say, you live in Newport and you want to go to Oceanside because you think that would be a really fun thing to do with your family, and your family, you're huddled in your house. So try not to do that unless that's an area you ordinarily would go to. So we're trying to keep people regional so you're not spreading a virus or bringing something back with you. Also, try to avoid times that are high traffic periods, because that's something that is really important, that we don't get these crowds. Practice good hygiene, and everyone's so stressed out, which is why you're going outside anyway to walk along the coast. Say hi. Doesn't mean you have to be a jerk, just because you've been huddled in a house. So be courteous, wave, talk at a safe distance to people. But again, remember those sort of 7 things that I just discussed. When we do talk about accessing areas, for those that are lucky enough to live along the coast and walking distance to coastal areas, that's great. You're not going to have to use a parking lot, which most parking lots are closed. Laguna's closed, Huntington's closed, Newport's closed. A lot of the state parks have restrictions. So it's really nice not to be able to use those. But
so yeah, also just let me jump in a note on the difference between what's happening right now versus what ordinarily happens. Ordinarily under the Coastal Act, if you want to close a beach parking lot, that's considered a development because you're altering access to the coast. And so that city would have to go to the Coastal Commission, get it agendized, explain why it's necessary to reduce public access or change public access, and then the Coastal Commission would have to grant that permit. Under ordinary circumstances, that's not likely to occur. There have been issues in Venice Beach where they tried to increase metered parking fees, and that was considered to be a development under the Coastal Act. So like this morning, I was walking at my local beach, which is by the San Clemente Pier, and they had blocked off the parking lot. And so there's a reason that they can do that, which we'll get into. But just so everybody's aware, ordinarily, if you see like a beach parking lot that's been closed, it requires a permit from the Coastal Commission, and those permits are not frequently granted if you're actually going to be reducing public access. So, and the same goes actually for public parks within the coastal zone. So even if it's just a park, but it's within 2 miles of the coast, that's also considered a coastal resource.
The limitation on these activities, these restrictions on coastal areas is really limited. So one of the issues that we spoke to the Coastal Commission before providing these comments, and one of the issues that, or tools that they have prepared is a one-page document that details that these limitations on public access are only for the duration of the shelter-in-place order from the governor, and it is only where it's the minimum action necessary to protect health and safety and does not involve the erection of any permanent structures. So that's something that is there to keep in mind. These are not intended to be permanent. As soon as that executive order is revoked or rescinded, then the normal permitting process will go back into place. So this is a snapback provision of this document. So we can expect to have the same level of robust public access in the future once these issues of public health are resolved. The other sort of silver lining is that a lot of these areas have a fair amount of people and visitors in the coastal areas routinely. There is the potential that some of these sites, the ones that have a lot of traffic because there are big parking lots, this might be a good time for them to sort of take a breath and recover on their own. So there might be an ability for some of these communities of plants and animals, different species, to just sort of have a little bit of a timeout, similar to a marine protected area space, and be able to recover and take a deep breath. I mean, I think we've all seen what this huddle in place kind of order has done for air quality, which has been quite remarkable. Let's hope that the species have a similar benefit here, which I think there's a really good chance that they might.
Yeah. So, and the reason that the rules are basically suspended, the ordinary Coastal Act rules are suspended, is because Governor Newsom has issued an official declaration of a state of emergency. And for any of the lawyers joining in, Public Resources Code 8571 is where you can find what that entails and what powers the governor has when a state of emergency is declared. And the governor is essentially able to suspend rules and regulations in furtherance of alleviating whatever is causing a state of emergency. And so that is kind of the legal structure under which this is all occurring. And Colin, I call him even-keeled Colin, but I tend to get a little bit more emotional about beach closures and most things in general. So just rest assured that like there is a legal structure for this. It's not unprecedented, and that we expect that when the pandemic has subsided, that we will return to normal and return to being able to access the coast at will. The parking lots will open again one day. But right now, people are encouraged to visit your local watershed, as Colin was saying, and try to stay local and take this as an opportunity to really explore the resources that you have in your own backyard. One thing that we want to encourage people to do is not just to, access the coast, keeping a safe social distance from other people, but to also explore other waterways within your area. I know that cities and counties have been working really hard to shelter the unsheltered populations residing within Orange County and the Inland Empire, and to make sure that vulnerable populations have a safe place to shelter, which means that a lot of the river trails that you may have previously been afraid to visit or didn't think was a good place to take your kids, you might find that the river trails are now very accessible and safe to use. And because not a lot of people use them all the time, they're also a great place to experience your local waterways, including, if you live near the Santa Ana River, the Santa Ana River Trail should be open. You can ride your bike there. Trabuco Creek is a place that I recently visited this past week in San Juan Capistrano. And so there are some walking trails along our local creeks and streams that I encourage everybody to check out, especially during this time when, like Colin said, everybody's stressed out. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future, but what is certain is that if we take care of our coastal resources, that they will be there for us to relieve stress and to enjoy in our time of need.
Well, and the other thing is, if you see something, document it and let us know. If you are out in an area that you don't know, you don't visit a lot. I know that I'm taking my kids to areas that might be the park that we drive past to go somewhere else, or a waterway we drive past to go to the beach. So we're checking out these sort of local areas a little bit more. But as you do that and you see something like a polluter or oil or something like that that's in the water and it bothers you, or it should bother you, let us know about it. We might be able to do something about it, but we only are made aware of some of these things if people tell us about it. And especially for these lesser used waterways, please let us know. A lot of these cities are very responsive. We might be able to get it done, get it fixed in a relatively short period of time, or do something on our own. But we're also a resource for you if you see something that annoys you about polluters.
Thank you everybody so much for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us in the future for our OCCK Streams.